morning. Alright, so here's my proposal for a thought I've actually been thinking about since high school, since before high school. This is a concept of like little test cities, little test beds, cities that are, designed to be broken down and reconstructed, year after year, or every 5 years, or every 10 years, for the sole purpose of studying, economic, political, social, group mind phenomena that we otherwise don't have the ability to study. And see, what I see as being beneficial to this. Now, here, let's back up and explain how it would work, and then I'll talk about why I think it's beneficial. So, first of all, they're little pocket areas of land, okay? Like, 12, 13, 14 acres. Maybe even larger. We could do like actual little mini cities. And the idea here is to get a group of people and preferably have anywhere from 2 to 10 test pods per state. And yeah, I think that would be about right. And that's not based on any numbers or anything. It just seems, anywhere from 2 to 10. Yeah, 2 to 10 sounds about right. Okay. Test pods per state. Now, how this works is you gather a group of volunteers, and you give them a piece of land, and the instructions are to build from scratch a complete society. Farming, you're going to have your agriculture, you're going to have your farming, your produce, your technology, everywhere from transportation to the paper that they write on. So it's going to be a completely self-contained little world. And so that's why I think, depending on what you're trying to study or what you're trying to find out, I believe that anywhere from one year to 10, possibly 20 years, maybe even a 50-year study, depending on the kind of information you're trying to gather. So they go out and they're volunteers and they start working. The points are the ideas that they have to stick to are, first of all, to design the city in such a way that disassembly would be fairly easy at the end of the test. And so if they were going to actually build, a small city with even skyscrapers or large buildings, that they would be able to deconstruct it at a rather fast pace. So, a fast and reusable style. So the idea of minimizing waste is a really prized and high-held belief in this system, just because it's going to be happening so much, we're going to be redoing it so much, and because as a world we're just looking for that. We're looking for ways to rebuild, reuse, make things cheaper, make reusing cheaper, make recycling cheaper. As it stands today, recycling tends to be a fairly expensive process, and for the most part it's not very effective. There's another video I'm going to be doing on actual design, recycle-friendly design for all products. And so, we'll talk about that in another video. But this all kind of like, goes hand in hand with this idea and with what I'm thinking and the whole concepts behind why this would even be a good idea in the first place. So, the group, they're given the land. They construct their city, they design their city plans, they design, sewage, how sewage is going to work. If there's any innovations in sewage they want to use or test out. They design the educational system, how it's going to work. If there's any innovations they want to test out. They design how they construct the city. Obviously, it has to be deconstructed and disassembled and made ready to reuse at the end of their stay in the little plot of land, in the test bed or test pod. I haven't decided quite yet what would a cool name for these would be, but test bed city. So they're staying there, and everything they do is new and inventive. We're testing out new laws. We're testing out new cutting edge ideas and concepts of social interaction, how society can work, how cities can be built. We're testing out like the actual topography of how a city is laid out. What is a better design? What is a worse design? What designs are going to be beneficial? What designs are going to be more energy effective and efficient? How to have just highly energy efficient cities. They're going to have to produce their own power. They're going to have to produce their own mode of transportation, and everything that they do is going to be cutting edge. Is going to be cutting edge, pushing the envelope, new ideas that otherwise would be risky to test or just release in normal society. So really just everything. It is a test bed for everything. Politics, economics, try out your own economy, what kind of money are you going to use? How are you going to use your money? What kind of, economic system are you going to use? Perhaps there is a better system out there. I've found flaw after flaw after flaw in the capitalist paper money based on whenever the Fed decides to roll out a couple million or trillion. I think that's what they do on the regular basis these days is, we're short on money, roll out a few trillion, no big deal. Obviously that's going to nip us in the butt. At some point it's going to turn around and bite us in the ass, but we're just kind of waiting for that day, aren't we? But anyway, that's the idea. So we have testbed cities, and the point of it is to be as innovative and forward-thinking as possible and to try anything and everything. You never know where a little gem is going to be hidden. You never know, how that's going to be made manifest. And by doing this, by doing these little testbed cities, by plotting these little areas and pushing them out and letting people try new ideas and trying new theories and trying new political, socioeconomic constructs and ideas, we're actually progressing our entire society much faster, much quicker, because we're giving it real life and real time experimental value. And by watching those little testbed cities, especially the long-term ones, where we're really testing the cutting edgy stuff, like let's see what happens in a society where we only have one law, and the law is, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, do whatever you want. Now that's a pretty heavy, hardcore theory. And however, there's been a ton of philosophers that have really laid a lot of their philosophy on that. As long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, who cares? Do whatever you want. That's the rule. That should be the only rule. The whole idea of who was it? Thomas or John Stuart Mill. That my freedom ends where your nose begins, or yeah, I think that's how it goes. My freedom ends where your nose begins. So basically, at the where somebody else's personal space starts is basically where my freedom ends. Otherwise, do whatever I want. As soon as I affect somebody else in any way, that's where I'm overstepping the bounds. And so those kind of ideas, they make a lot of logical sense, but we've never actually tested them out because they sound so radical and far-fetched. We've never actually decided to implement it or really test it out in a in a real life scenario. So I would love to see something like this get off the ground, and I would love to be a part of something like this. Perhaps, I have 2 projects I'm working on currently, and one of them is a pretty big project. One of them is trying to get some new technology-based rehab centers off the ground with the House of Waking Spirits project. But if there was a project that I would be willing to dedicate the rest of my life to, it would be such a project. Because the level of advancements that we would see, just the raw, innovative, creative burst of, just constant raw creative and innovative energies, really, is so promising and seems so powerful that I could totally get into something like that. I could be behind something like that 100%. So, depending on what happens in the next few years, whether or not I get anything else off the ground and working, and if this isn't already something that somebody else is trying to get off the ground, I would be more than willing to get a website up, get some cash earned, pull some money, and really try to implement something, so long as our world sees the testbed cities as actual mechanisms to generate new ways and ideas of living, instead of just, oh, that's interesting, let's write that down, but actually use them to see if something would really work in a real-time, real-life situation. And then, if it does, and if it does have benefits, and if it does have positive effects, and if we can somehow keep the politicians from skewing the numbers and making certain ideas look like they didn't really work out when in fact they really did, because we all know that they're really good at that. As long as we take the effective meat of what's happening and really apply it to society, instead of just, marking it down as just another fascinating thing, like the Naomi Project. Oh, well, they legalized heroin for these kids in this little test project city area, but, and the numbers show that every country that's legalized drugs has had a dramatic reduction in crime and recovery, and people just don't have that much of a desire to use anymore. But the numbers look great. But the United States seems to be pretty slow at picking up on stuff like that, even though there are countries all over the world now that are picking up on that and that are actually, implementing more lenient drug laws, and as a result of that, they're seeing dramatic effects and dramatic positive effects. They're seeing rehabilitation, rehab effectiveness, I guess, the effectivity of actually going through rehabilitation skyrocket for some reason. Now that these countries, in some of these countries, now that the drug is no longer illegal, for some reason, going through rehab is much more effective. Is it the mindset? We don't know. See, that's what some of these test bed systems would be good for. Like, we see that happening. We see great numbers coming from, and great things coming from countries. We see death rates of overdoses decreasing dramatically in countries that have legalized what is considered an illicit substance these days. But why is that happening? Well, the testbed cities would be a really good way to actually test that out. We could build a couple of Twin Cities and say, let's do some innovations here, but at the same time, let's test out this theory. Let's take a look at why this is actually the case, or why this appears to be the case. So that's my spiel. That's my idea. That's kind of the philosophy, the idea I've been rolling around for years now. I would love to see it implemented, and if anybody out there is actually willing, who has the means to help get something like this off the ground, I would love to be a part of it. So, yeah, testbed cities. Anyway, I've got to get back to doing stuff. So I will see you guys later, and thanks for watching.